we've just been on our walking tour. We've just been around the afterday. We've come now to the wing makers themselves at Ede Ravenscroft. We were talking a bit about the justice system as a whole and how automation could actually increase access to justice. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen in that?
Well, it would be nice to see a systemic change. It may not, but what could happen is that the bar, the judiciary, and the entire dispute resolution service in the country really embraces technology from the most basic level to better data management, document management, and so forth, to automating what can be automated, to providing services to the judge and so forth, but not, as we just mentioned earlier, to the point of judgment. I think that should still be kept very human. And you might say that AI shouldn't wear a wig, but it should prepare everything up to that. But will it actually happen? Will it actually happen? What are the drivers? If you're constantly being rewarded for operating in the same way that you did 30 years ago, you will continue to do so. What are the market levers that will push this change? Even if the technology is there, will it actually happen?
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, we've gone through in the UK the budget cycle, and the answer is generally there is no more money, but the administration of justice needs to continue. I do wonder whether there are economic factors which actually force that digitization of justice. But one of the things I feel a lot about is the kind of co-pilot versus agent distinction that's coming out in AI. So I think there are a few that would argue, maybe there are some, but a few that argue that a judge could use a co-pilot to help them conduct some work in the process of reaching his or her judgment. Yeah. But an agent would say, well, actually, there could be autonomous decision-making on the case, and this is where it becomes much more contentious. Yeah. So I wonder whether, especially for the lower value cases, whether there actually is a role for non-human-led judgment. Just curious what you think.
I still think no. I think even for a parking ticket, I think we should still keep it human. But I think if we could introduce technology into the other 95% of our process, we're going to get huge savings and huge economies of scale across the justice system. I mean, one interesting thing that I've seen in Australia recently was a project to use an AI to effectively act as a lawyer sort of in your ear for someone who was a litigant person who had the representation. The idea was the AI would hear the case, hear the evidence and so forth, and then help the litigant to present a defense. And it worked okay, a bit lumpy. The general consensus was we're not there yet. But what is wrong in that? What is wrong in a litigant in person turning up in court with, connection?
And what's the alternative? The alternative is no representation.
Yeah, right? and which then slows down justice because the judges are always complaining about litigants in person turning up, not a clue what to do.
Yeah.
And so, then they go, let's give them some legal aid. But legal aid may not come. It may not be sufficient.
Pretty narrowly kind of chucked in.
Exactly. It's only anything commercial. Forget about it. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So we're kind of at this impasse where we could improve access to justice, but we need leadership, we need decisions to be made to push that through, and we need people to look at budgets and to actually say to people, well, look, some of the things that we're going to give you are going to be conditioned on using new technology.
Yes. And I do think, maybe I'm more of an extremist on this, but I do think that autonomous decision-making will play some part, and whether that is in very small cases or maybe not in a dispute case. I think one of the really interesting things in the narrative right now is there is a strong pushback on autonomous decision making. And there's certain non-brainers there. No-brainers, in the case of crime or family, extraordinarily difficult and not right, and there's moral questions. But, in other things, I think the challenge will be it's really hard to verify an autonomous agent's decisions. You basically have to do the same amount of work as if we didn't have a automated. And I think then the kind of question of risk appetite becomes quite interesting. If the alternative is you have no legal help, or you get something that you think is 90% as good as a human, is it worth it?
Well, that's a very, very the whole idea of cost is generally. But you could say that about medicines. Should I try and get an appointment with my PGs and then hopefully get medicine bonds, so forth, or should I just jump onto eBay and get it sent to me? But it turned out this is the whole problem with skipping steps.
But medicine's so interesting, right? Because medicine is another area where you say, well, this is extremely high risk and extremely human and very risky. But if you look at AI imaging diagnostics on X-rays, it's starting to spit out a better level of judgment than human.
Yeah, but I think that's different because fundamentally that's a database process. It's looking at huge volumes of complex unstructured data. It's going to things. That makes a lot of sense. But the decision of again, I think that can be
Yes.
We can be using AI and other forms of data analysis systems to point people in the right direction to show them statistical information. But when you start to run an algorithm at the effective single truth, it's very, very, because the human life is complicated, of course, and squeezing something into some very simplistic algorithm pattern, even with the most advanced AI, it worries me.
The context of there is limited as well, right? So, so taking that analogy, you instruct a lawyer, they get some autonomous recommendation advice. They then verify it, and then they consider that in the context of the wider investigation strategy, what they may be in. If that was the case, and we have this massive efficiency,
years, and this is I'm getting into a very, very deep sociological discussion here, which is that if you actually made access to justice extremely affordable, you would understandably increase the quantity of cases being court, or at least the needed litigation. And then the question is, does society want that? Now, the instinctive reaction, of course, is yes, absolutely. There's lots and lots of people who have disputes or potential disputes they want to have solved. The less talked about aspect is what happens if you then have tons and tons and tons of, vexatious, if that's the correct word, litigants who are just picking facts of it. Because it's so easy to do that. You can do it. And of course, I don't think there's any black and white answer. There's lots of shades of grey because clearly there's an enormous unmet legal need.
I share the same hypothesis, which is there is, as you call it, an unmet need. Right, so there's a certain amount of dispute work and other legal work which isn't done because you don't have access to justice or you don't have the know-how and the to see something. What you're saying that if you had this policy question, which is, do you want to start flooding the justice system, which is already stretched? Doesn't that then, you go to the supply side reform and you say, well, in fact, that would be okay, provided it was much more efficient.
Well, it's rather like house prices. House prices go up because there's demand. But you also increase house prices by increasing quantity of money used by mortgages. So if you make it easier to borrow, this doesn't reduce house prices by making them more affordable. It actually has the opposite effect. The more you can borrow, the more house prices go up. It's a macro effect. So I suppose what we're actually talking about, in this term, we're talking about macro justice, and macroeconomics of justice in this country and in other countries. And there will be unintended consequences. And we see this, for example, in Brazil. From what I understand, it's extremely easy to litigate Brazil digital processes which are in place. Because of that, there's an enormous backlog. Even with some digitization courts there, they just can't do it.
It's kind of a moral hazard anyway. Right? But then, again, on the supply side, I wonder also AI could be very helpful in screening, which is, at phase one, it's just a vexatious case. And someone has just sort of thought, well, is this worthy of investing in public funds? And then the other question is, to what extent do we as a society believe that justice is a fundable good? Right? And we believe it to some extent, which is to the extent of the budget of the MOJ. But, if we saw that increase, we would see that as a good thing. Who knows? Obviously, in the US, which has a very different culture of litigation, it's different, but maybe you get more private administration of justice. There's a lot of kind of variables.
Absolutely, and also access to justice isn't just about big disputes between different parties. It can often be simply not being able to transact. So somebody wants to run out of their leasehold and move to a freehold. but it won't necessarily end up in courts.
Yes.
But it's complex transactional process.
Yes.
So many steps to go through. There's letters and communications going back and forth, many things to check. It's constantly, and that could put people off. Particularly if you have a party who's dragging their feet
And this is where I do wonder whether that autonomous decision making is better than no decision making. Because you're dealing with very, very simple things, but for people who generally will have very low knowledge of kind of their lives. And again, this is something which we spend a lot of time fixating on big law firms and corporate legal teams, and this sort of other slice is an area. I personally am very bullish on the potential technology to actually really create a lot of value.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing though is that it connects directly to transaction law. So you read a contract, you're reviewing the contract. How far does a human lawyer get into detail of this?
Yes.
How far do they apply their judgments? Or do they just say, hey, generative AI, so probably not now, but maybe, I'm fairly realistic to say in 5 to 10 years, you're literally at the point where you're just like, I am totally confident